We're just gonna bring some people in. We're waiting just a few minutes for everyone to jump in. Quite a few people register all the time, but then they don't always show up. So maybe just they need a reminder to come and watch. But we want to invite you all to come and join in. The link is in the descriptions to join on the Zoom link with us and register and just jump on the call so we can have conversation. Just going to admit the current people in. And here comes Jean and Jennifer. And welcome, Jean and Jennifer.
Hello.
Hello. Jennifer, you are welcome to join in audio or video if you choose. Or
I think Jean's under her desk.
Yeah, Jean's.
It's late there. She might be napping. We see you.
All right. I'm just going to select here. There we go. And all right. So if you are joining us, this is our weekly Down the Rabbit Hole. And today we are going to start with a conversation around metaphors because I don't particularly believe that people understand how powerful they are and the type of influence they can have on and the type of influence they do have from the very fundamental aspects of how you create your reality. I've been in this field of personal growth and personal development for many years, and over the last 30 years, there's Josephine coming in. Great. For the last 30 years or so, I've been a strong advocate that the words we choose affect how we perceive and deal with the reality we choose to live in. It's so, I see people so often, they're just unconscious of their communication style, their communication language, the impact that it can have. And I think it's really an important topic or conversation that we can have more than just once a week. Right? It's a conversation that should be that we should be reflecting on and digesting and dissecting on a regular basis, not only with groups and communities like these, but also with people in our lives. The thing is that most people just take language and the elements of it, because there's different elements of language, right? They take it for granted. It's just what we do, you know? But what they don't always look at is that it's what you do 24/7, 365 days every year of every year of your life. Think about it, right? You are in communication with something or someone consciously and unconsciously all the time. I mean, it's kind of how we know we exist. There's something going on. If you were completely still in your body, right? Like if your body was comatized and there was nothing going on there, right? The thought process, that internal communication that's going on, or the perceiving of, even if your eyes were open and you were perceiving communication from your environment around you as far as where you are, who you're with, what you were doing, what was going on, that's communication, right? 24/7. I mean, can you think of a time when you did not communicate, when you were not communicating? Let me just add Mary in. Hello, Mary. And there we go.
Mary's there. Josephine. Hi, Josephine.
Hey,
How
good
are
to
you?
see ya.
Jean, we were talking about you when you were gone, so
Yeah.
Mr. Albert, you're gonna have to watch the replay.
So, when you think about it, can you think of a time when you are not communicating? I mean, it's just, right? I mean, you're communicating with yourself, you're communicating with others, you're communicating with your environment, right? And the things or people in your environment. So today I want to kind of break the ice and kind of dive into life's rich tapestry. And maybe we'll even touch on some thorny issues or topics, maybe. Um, and as we start to explore the galaxy of how everyday speech is literally littered with metaphors, metaphors that can impact the way you think, the way you speak, the things you do, how you do them, and what you're willing to do or accept or even not accept as a reality that you want. So I was introduced to metaphors my early 20s, and I really, it just, there's something about it that I understood was even bigger than what my teacher was teaching me about it. It was I learned about it in depth, anyways, in when I did my neurolinguistic programming training. Right, my NLP training was a 28-day in Colorado intensive, and it was every day, 28 days. We just kind of went crazy and just kind of dived into neurolinguistic programming. And when it came to metaphors, I believe my teacher was Charles Faulkner. Great NLP practitioner. I don't even know if he practices anymore, but and he started talking about metaphors and went into metaphors and kind of broke them down. And there was something in there just in my mind. I thought there's something more to this than even what's being told. And after the training, I really started to kind of go into it more and look into it more and dive into the whole science of metaphors and how they can transform things and make changes. And as I went through my neurolinguistic programming and my hypnotherapy training, I really saw how metaphors were a powerful tool that was used by the practitioners to help to support people to shift their perception, their experience, and their reality in very powerful and very subtle ways. And it was a great way to shape beliefs, attitudes, and actions without a lot of conscious resistance, if any at all. Okay. And even in the initial conversation that I started off here, when I actually started off the chat here, when you think about it, I said, let's break the ice. Well, that's a metaphor, right? You think about when I say break the ice, what does that mean? What does that conjure up? Without your conscious mind having um, any resistance to that phrase, it took it in, accepted it, it ran through the concept and the idea of breaking ice, right? So just from those words and in conversation, right? In conversation, I was able to influence thought processes that you had and the direction in which a communication went. Then I said, okay, and then we'll dive into life's rich tapestry. Now, everyone here listening, whether you're live or you're watching it, like whether you're on the call here with us or you're watching the stream, life's rich tapestry means completely something different for every one of you. You all have your own idea of what that means, yet I'm still having you think about what life's rich tapestry is. Then I also talked about touching on some thorny issues or topics. Well, thorny issues and topics for you may not be the same thorny issues and topics for me, right? Then I said, okay, we'll explore the galaxy of how everyday speech was littered with metaphors. Right? So now I'm getting you to think, okay, well, it's everywhere, right? And how those metaphors can impact the way you think, the way you speak, and the things you do. So metaphors are everywhere, and they happen all the time in our communication. And because they're everywhere, and because they're in our communication every time, I think we just kind of just accepted it as a part of how we exist and how we communicate with the species that we call humans. Okay. So what is a metaphor? A metaphor is taking one thing, subject, topic, idea, concept, and blending it to equal another one that's completely different. So, life is a stage. It's one of the most popular ones, right? It's Shakespeare, right? Life is a stage. Well, that kind of sets the tone for giving lessons, learnings, and experiences from one thing to the other. Well, on stage these things happen, so that relates to how life occurs, right? So they're two completely different things if you think of them individually, but then it's by saying that this is that, or this equals that, or these are that, it allows our mind to just make that link, and then the transformation of information between the two, it's seamless. It's just accepted as, oh, well, if this is that, well, then okay, we accept it, right? So I'm going to throw a few of them, and then let's have some conversation on these, because this can be really fun conversation. So see which ones kind of spark for you. Life is a stage. She's had a heartbreak, right? They are a complete mess. He's beside himself. I know people who bottle up their feelings. Okay, and some societal ones. The war on drugs. Time is money. Running out of time, as if time was a thing, right? It's like, um, they are at their peak of health, right? Fight or battle against cancer or any other sickness, right? In fact, there was a 2019 study that I came across where it showed that military metaphors, like battle against cancer and fight against cancer, military metaphors when dealing with any kind of illness actually undermined the treatment that was being given, because it was like it was internally there was this going on. That was their experience. There was a battle. There was a fight. So there had to be a winner and a loser, right?
Well, I mean, basically, you have to look at the fact that, if you're battling an illness, you're battling a disease, you're battling yourself.
Well, this is
Because
it, right?
it is part of you. I mean, that's where, I didn't even want to get on this call today because I'm just dead tired.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I feel like a bus hit me yesterday, this morning. And it's, so what Gary's saying is, he's talking about, we
Joseph,
all
he's
feel a
laughing
lot
because you
better
look like a
now, but
bus
we
hit
don't
you. That's good.
understand how we used to talk to ourselves, exactly. So we're talking to ourselves, and when I hear people say, gosh, I'm really feeling my age today, what the hell does that mean? I mean, and if you just turn that just a little bit, make a little bit of a right turn on that, you could turn it around to where it's going to energize you. But if you're telling yourself, I am dead tired, you know, um, then you are. It's as
Yeah.
simple as that.
And we take it for granted. We think, oh, it can't be that simple, or it's just they're just talking out there, they're just throwing some BS out there. But I'm telling you that it has an impact, right?
It
So
really
there's
does.
actually in 2011, Stanford University did this test where they had two groups, Group A, Group B. Group A, they gave them a pamphlet describing crime in the city as a wild beast preying upon the city. That's pamphlet A, right? Group B, they give them the same pamphlet, but the description and the metaphor they utilized was they described the crime as a virus taking over the city, right? Then, after the giving Group A and Group B those pamphlets, they asked group they asked both groups how they asked them how to tackle the issue of crime. And first of all, and the I don't know how. So when I read it, I made note of it, and I thought, well, is it how it was presented, or was it the actual information? But I think it was a little bit of both. So in the article, it said they were asked how to tackle the issue. I'm like, well, okay, tackle the issue. Well, okay, all right, that's already kind of priming the the plate for how they're going to deal with it, right? So I don't know if that was the person writing the article, or that's how they actually asked it. So I don't know. Um, but when they were asked how to tackle or deal with the issue, I'm going to say deal with the issue. Um, the DA, right, who got the wild beast metaphor, were 20% more inclined to take military type actions to deal with it. Same information, different metaphor.
And we have to keep in mind too that, you know, a lot of these metaphors, they're created by marketing firms and PR firms and such to incite emotion. It's like, well, we need to get people riled up. We need to get them, and so they use this terminology because this isn't something that Gary and I just stumbled on. I mean, this has been in use for decades, maybe centuries.
Well, it's actually we actually learn metaphors before we learn language.
Yeah, well, because we're storytellers.
Yeah, so in in the 7 day program that we get, the art of creating your reality, um, we talk on day one about the 7 mirrors of reflection, right? Mirrors of reality that we get reflected. It shows us our reality. And um, the very base code at the beginning of it all, right? We have these, what Ross and I consider a base code, which is the digits, the numbers. So, they say that, math is the language of the universe or whatever, right? So I think there's some elements of truth to that. And then the next level, as we're going up the ladder to create a reality, is the signs and symbols that come from those digits, right? And then from there we have from that we start to create words on what those signs and symbols are and what they mean and stuff like that. And then the next level, which is what we call the phrases, is where metaphors kind of fit in, because they're short, simple phrases that we put together to create meaning and to create reality from. And then from there, we can start to unravel reality. It really doesn't happen until that point. The base code, which is what we teach in the 7 day program, helps to influence the signs and symbols, and then helps to influence the words that we choose and the words we put together, and then helps to influence the metaphors we start to then start to turn around and change and create for ourselves, so that we step into the reality we want. And then the other and then it really influences the other 3 mirrors of reflection. So it's even before we actually start to have sentences in communication, we start to put together these metaphors of how we experience reality.
So one of the things that I say when we're doing the 7 day is, I mean, so everybody that's on the call, you know, how many of you have used or use currently affirmations? Just put a yes down in the comments. Just type in yes if you,
Yes.
Okay, great.
or say it. Yes.
Yes. I want to say yes.
And what I've always said is that affirmations are great and such. So we do, you know, some people have a great habit of doing affirmations for 15 minutes, half an hour a day and such, or an hour even such. And my comment to that is, well, all right, well, what about the other 23 hours of the day? You know, what are you doing? In many cases, we're using metaphors, because metaphors are a variation of affirmations. So if I'm going through the day saying, God, I'm just dead tired today, I'm actually using a type of affirmation. It's not a positive one, but nevertheless it is. And it's a program that I'm telling my brain, I'm telling my mind, telling my subconscious, telling my body, you're tired. That's how it works.
So let's kind of touch on some possibly thorny topics now. Okay.
Keep belts on, please.
So 18 months ago, some event happened on the planet.
Now wait a minute. Isn't thorny isn't that a metaphor?
Yeah, why? So 18 months ago, some event happened on the planet that I think everybody knows about. Um, and when that event occurred, I started to watch the metaphors that were being tossed around and utilized and kind of presented as this is so. And I don't have the words verbatim, but when it came along, it was this virus that was created some kind of sickness and illness, and that was it, right? And you would treat it like the flu, and that's kind of what we kind of had this concept and idea of it was, right? Then they started to really start to turn the narrative on, where it then became, and when I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, came so clear to me. It was like and it was broadly broadcasted on a regular everywhere I saw it. Not that I watched a whole lot of the stuff, but whenever I did, the fact that I only watched so little and I could see it everywhere that I saw it meant that it was everywhere, right? It became this invisible threat. Oh my God, an invisible threat. What kind of metaphor? You imagine an invisible threat in your home? I mean, how would you be feeling all the time if there was an invisible threat in your home?
It's everywhere. It's everything you touch. It's in the air. It's on your money.
It's like, and so and that was one of the major turning points for me. I was like, whoa, something's going on here. It's no longer something that's you got to deal with your health and get healthy. It's you got to protect yourself against something you can't even freaking see. Right, and you don't know how it works, how it functions. It's everywhere you go, and it became that narrative. So I could start to see how that was a shift in the narrative and the metaphor that they gave around this thing called a virus. Right, and now understand that I'm not downplaying any of the severity, even the serious. I'm absolutely not. I'm talking only about the narrative aspect of it and the metaphors and how they've shifted and turned how we start to look at it and how we deal with it, how we conceptualize it, how we even believe around it. Okay, this is not a bash on the virus itself. Absolutely not. The conversation here is about, well, if on a global scale a metaphor can go from, okay, well, it's a sickness, to it's an invisible threat. What does that do to our psyche? Because it became a part of our conversation internally and externally, right? Then they labeled as the enemy, right? Not, it wasn't just now an invisible threat. Now it became the invisible enemy. So it wasn't just a threat that you had to be aware of. It was now something you had to attack, right? And from the 2011 study, if we have that metaphor going on, then they're more likely to take military action towards dealing with it. Right? And so that's, and there's all kinds of different ways that this happens, both for, in supporting people to purchase things and giving them reason to purchase things, to taking actions, to all the way from how you vote, to what you sign up for, to when you pull your card out of your wallet. It's based on a metaphor of some kind that shifted or altered that.
Actually, Gary, if we remind everybody, if you go back to the guides tab on the group page, and rewatch episode 3, we talk about controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
And about how metaphors are. If you want to really learn about metaphors, listen to the news. Listen to the news, and you'll start to see patterns in it as they are being used to, trigger different emotions, portray different events, and they're the masters. They are incredibly good at it. And there's I think it's in 3 that there's actually an exercise to do while watching the news, so you can better learn how these metaphors or triggers are used when you're watching and listening to the news, because everything is timed very, very well. A word is said, an image is shown, etc. Um, but they are throughout our lives, and then social media is, is a close second.
So yeah,
It's
so I
not
mean,
necessarily all bad. I mean, there's stuff out there that can be good too, and that's what Gary and I are all about. Is that, I mean, this is kind of, part of the framework of the work that we do.
yeah. Yeah, well, it's again, it's the underlying structure that creates, and it's really kind of like the bridge from the structure of reality to the creation of reality. Metaphors are kind of like in that middle piece,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the structure of reality is understanding and having your own in our infinity matrix process. The structure is understanding and knowing that you have control and choice over the code from the digit level, altering that, shifting that, so that you start to change the words that you use and the language that you put together, and therefore the metaphors you create, and that starts to then change the story.
Exactly.
And when you change the story, then you can then you start to notice things shift in from the sentences. You change the story, which then creates your life theme, and that's really the mirrors of reflection that we talk about in the 7-day program.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so what kind of things have kind of come up for you guys when we start talking about this? Because there's one other thing I want to talk about, but that's again, so you would think on a base level is so minute, but I believe it's got way more power if you understand it and you start to shift it. But before I get there, I want to kind of get some what's coming up for you guys when we bring these things to light.
Personally, I don't watch news or read any of that sort of stuff. I more or less go as to what I'm guided, which, sometimes like with you talking and saying certain words and stuff, I'm feeling it in my body and I'm like telling myself, calm down, it's just a word. Like I'm literally feeling like the emotions of those words.
Wow.
And, like, so for me, that's why I don't watch social or like do a whole lot of social media, like
Mm-hmm.
Facebook mostly is just for, connecting to family and like-minded people. So it's nice because I've been through like quite a lot of those stages and I understand like the word aspect. So it's, like it takes a lot of work to really watch how you word things.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then, you catch yourself saying, like one of those words and, and then it's like taking that moment and rewriting that word in the moment.
Yes.
Like same with,
you're recoding
like,
it, right? You're recoding it. Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same with like moments in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could rewrite those moments, and energetically it affects you and the people that are involved.
Yeah.
On a subconscious level.
100%.
Well, in the 7-day program, I mean, we talk about this, and we talk about the idea of finding out where, when you find yourself using, some of this terminology, finding out where it came from, where was it said. I'll give you an example. Is that my wife would come home and I would start having a conversation, and she'd look at me and say, "So, how long did you talk to your mom today?" I'm like, "How'd you know I talked to my mom?" Because your whole terminology changed. You're using her terminology, you're using her metaphors, you're using her analogies. And I'm like, wow. I mean, I didn't realize it. because it was ingrained deep into me from birth. And so, these things, but this is, this is part of the way our species works too, is that we pass on our knowledge of good or bad and such to each other through verbal communication. And but that
Come on, buddy.
what's that? Mary, did you say something?
I must
No?
have, but I was talking to a dog.
Oh, she's.
Oh. Turn on your video. Let us see the dog.
I've been out at the barn working all day. Y'all don't want to see me.
What's the dog on? But anyhow, so when we take the time, we catch ourselves. Like you're saying, Josephine, we catch ourselves, and it's like, okay, now let me figure out where this came from, because then we go all the way back, and then we remove that.
But we also have to be careful, because like we could be missing the moment in
True.
going back. So, so really it's, like, okay, do you observe it or do you analyze, so it's
learning from it. You keep the learning, but then you distract from the energetic impact of it, right? So you keep the learning from the moment, and then you can move on for sure. Because if you don't take the learning, then it'll show back up again.
And the moment will just keep recreating itself. So you have to make that choice of, do I want to just remove this now? Okay, so it doesn't just continue on, because it's ingrained deep enough to where it's a habit. If it's not a habit, if you can determine that it's not a habit, then there's not an issue. You come to a place of choice. Just like, do I need to do this, or do I not?
I was going to see that Reina on the group page, she said, life is like a box of chocolates. I mean, that's another one. It's like you never know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
So one of the things.
Anyone else? So
you've all given me an epiphany. Because I often say things like, with regard to my time, I want, like, I like to cross stitch, and have moments of creativity. And often I find that I'm spending a lot of time maintaining the house and the acreage and taking care of dogs and horse and cat and husband. And I say to myself, I want.
In that order, right?
Well, yeah, he knows he's on the bottom. But the epiphany was in the phrasing, I want. And what I feel is happening is that I'm going to continue to want, because I'm framing it with that word. I want to have time to stitch, instead of I do have time to stitch or express myself creatively. And so while you're communicating about these metaphors, and the metaphors aren't always as obvious as things like he talks out of both sides of his face.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're not often that obvious. And also, while you're speaking, words are power, and they create the framework of our lives, not only just in the art of metaphors, which are really pretty cool, which can be pretty cool because they do invoke all these things, but just words in general. And like I said, the epiphany was, I continue to say things like, I want. Well, guess what? You're going to continue to want until you change the verbiage.
Well, when we did our live stream about the 5G network, you're spot on. You hit it right on the head. Is that what are you projecting out?
Right.
Okay. Are you projecting out and coming from a place of I want, I need, I don't have?
From a place of lack, right?
Place of lack, exactly. Or are you projecting out, I have an abundance of time, I have an abundance of energy, I have an abundance of wealth, I have an abundance of health. And so that's, and a lot of times people, they don't understand that just that slight change, that slight variance of their thought process or their vocabulary is makes all the difference.
It can totally alter your reality. It really
Absolutely.
can. It
It's
really
huge.
can. Yeah.
Yes, it has.
Mhm.
It's like self-sabotage.
Hmm.
Yep. For sure. For sure.
And it's sneaky. It's self-sabotage.
It
It's
is.
self-sabotage that is because we're not taught. Our tribe doesn't teach us until we come to a place where we're ready, apparently. Our tribe doesn't teach us to be careful with thoughts and words and
Yeah.
frameworks like
We
that.
don't get taught it in school, right? We don't get
No,
taught it in
no.
work when we leave school. Definitely not taught in universities. It's something that I think that the personal development movement has really kind of brought more to the forefront in the last 30 years, and it's becoming more and more apparent now. And that's why you're hearing people understanding and talking about the importance of the words you use, the language you use, and it's now starting to leak out into the normal everyday, even though they may not practice it. You'll hear people, I hear parents in the playground all the way talking about the language they use and stuff. I hear that, but are they doing it? It's at least they're aware of it. It's a start.
But I would probably change that just a little bit, because you go back to the analogy I just used about my mother. We are taught.
Yes,
True.
We are taught.
What you're taught.
it's a pattern,
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
ancestral pattern.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So let me pose something else there. So this is something that I used to teach because when I taught and certified hypnotherapists, I really kind of drove home the importance of the language they use. Because if we're talking with someone in a state of total receptivity, we should be super hyper aware of the language we're using, because one wrong word could totally mess up the whole session, right? And so right down to the very core of thinking how we talk about things on an everyday basis. Think of, because there's ambiguity in a lot of the language we use, right? And understand that ambiguity means there's two different meanings that could possibly come from that one thing. And if there's two different meanings coming from that one thing, the way your unconscious mind works is it takes in both of those meanings, runs a scenario with both of them, and then comes out with the one that it's going to choose. So it's already processed both of them. It's not one or the other. It's this and then it decides on one that it's going to react to the world around. So when we use the phrase, which is definitely in the English speaking language, I don't know how they say it in other languages, but when we use the phrase or the metaphor, these are the days of our week, or days of the week. Okay, so when we break that down, let's start on the end of it. The week is in the language, in the English language, that becomes the noun of the sentence. Okay, it becomes the object of the sentence, the week. But week can be spelled W-E-E-K and W-E-A-K. Same word, same sound, two completely different meanings. So who is the weak? Who is that? Right? So if we're saying it's the days of the week, societally, we're saying if there are 7 days and there's a society that owns or claims those days, and we're calling them the week, it's days of the week. That then puts us in a pool of being weak, less than, being not empowered, being at the mercy of something else. And it's in our everyday conversation, right? And then we say days, D-A-Y-S and D-A-Z-E. So it's now the trance of the week. So there's these people that are in these trances, they're in these altered states, and they are less than empowered. They're not strong. There's that underlying meaning that's always there. And yes, there's the actual physical element of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well. But to understand what is being said when that communication happens, whether you say it yourself or someone says it to you, your unconscious mind has to go in and run both of those scenarios every single time to decide which one it is you're actually meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, okay, well, what about the week end? Okay, well, hold on now. Okay, so now, 52 times a year, I'm going to go into a week end. So, and then it's a death. It's a finishing. It's a completion. Right? And yet and so just in the languaging and the phrasing, and while I understand that it's a little bit of shift, it's a huge shift, even though it's micro communication stuff. It's a huge shift in concept for people to understand that can have an impact. And I understand that. So at the sacrifice of not seeming this alien guy who walks in and talks to people, sometimes I don't care, but for the most part, I still got to function with the population. When I'm speaking with them, I'll still say, hey, have a good weekend, or what are you going to do this week? I still have that communication, but internally I have a shift that I've established many years ago that's always there for me, because I know how my communication with myself needs to be. And I don't, unless someone comes into a teaching environment with me, I feel I'm imposing on them, and I don't feel it's ultimately right. So if the conversation comes up and it feels right, then I'll have the conversation with them, and then I'll start to use the languaging differently with them. But for me, when I say days of the week, internally, it's automatically shifted to days of the strong, because that's what I want to be a part of. I want to be the day of the strong. I don't mind being in a daze. I think being in trance states all the time is a normal thing, and we can't get out of that. So that piece of that statement is okay with me, right? But the cool thing is I get to choose the days I'm in. Right? I've mastered that. I've done more hypnosis than anybody I know at all. And I know a lot of people that do hypnosis. I've been doing hypnosis since I was 13 years old. I did it every single night, up until my firstborn. And then, there was interruptions because sleep wasn't the same for a window of time. But as soon as I could get back onto it, I do it. And it's a nightly process for me to go into that state. I do a self-hypnosis process, takes me in, and I'm always making sure that I'm being aware of the trances that I'm in, and whether they're useful, whether they're not, and what I can do when they're not to shift myself out of it. So the trance part of it, I'm okay with that days. And of the strong is I want to attract that. I want to be in that realm. I want to be in that place where, where Ross and I can be in a community of 7,000+ people that are of the strong mindset, right? Which is what we're 7,300, something like that in the group right now, and to be in that community of people that I can have access to, where they can understand that, that makes sense to shift it to days of the strong, or instead of the weekend, it's a strong beginning. Because for me, the Saturday, Sundays used to be when I would kind of do these workshops, seminars, these events that kind of built me up. So it was more of a strong beginning for me than a weekend. I never saw it as a weekend. Right? So for me, I was always going into the strong beginning, because that's where something new was going to shift. Something was going to, so that was the languaging and the metaphor that I used. It was a strong beginning.
And every day you can say, hi, today is Monday, and today is Tuesday, and hi, Wednesday, and hi, Thursday. And every day is a lovely day. Yeah, and good day, strong day.
Why do we say you have to wake up in the morning? Who the hell is morning? I'm not morning anything. Right? It's an awakening. right? It's an awakening. It's a coming to life event. It's not a mourning event.
The English language has morphed into something that's bizarre when you really step back. Gary's pointed out a lot of this stuff. To me, and I'm just like, that's interesting. It's like, let me think about that. And then once you start to kind of look at it and look at the language that you're using and the language that society is using, it really does make you kind of wonder. It's like why we have one of the hardest, the English language is one of the hardest languages to learn because of what he's saying.
Because it's so messed up.
It's just messed up. It's like, well, when you week, it's like, well, which one am I supposed to use? I don't have a lot of energy. I'm day of the week.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
And
and every morning you got to.
I'm talking about night. Am I a soldier for the English army? Am I a knight in shining armor, or am I sleeping?
Yeah, there's so much ambiguity in our language, and I don't know if other languages have that much ambiguity, but it definitely, for sure, there's a lot of that in and the way that we utilize it, and just so loosely without understanding the impact, to me has always kind of been a mystery, and I wonder why people just don't get that it has an impact.
Yeah, I think I spoke.
Josephine, you're fortunate to be in a place where you can energetically feel that, and that's a great skill and tool to have. I have that to some degree. It doesn't impact me in a large way, but it definitely raises flags for me when I'm in conversation and I hear people say these things. For me, it's like boom, bing, 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 and to the point when I've had to actually turn it off when I'm in conversation with people, because when I turn it on, when I'm in therapy, I turn it on, and I hear people talking, and I know right away what the issue is, and how long they've had it. It's clear as day for me. It like pops up. It's like boom, 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 boom. Okay, well, here's what we need to do. Here's what we need to do. We need to do that. We need to change this. We need to shift that. Things like that. Even and as we say this, so one of the things, Mary, I know you're listening still. One of the things is you had said. You were using present term in the language, and I was going to make a note of it, but
manifesting is what I got from Mary.
Yeah,
like manifesting in the moment.
I used the word I want.
But you were saying but it was a sneaky one.
Oh.
Yes, it's the word I want, but it was what you said is it was something I always use, or I'm always using, or something.
Oh, okay.
It was the word right before that locked you in to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that was, I can't remember. If you replay this, you'll hear it. It was the word right before it that actually locks you into a loop of that's always what you're going to be doing, because that particular word, the verb tense, and again verb tense, it's I'm languaging, right?
It's like my allergies.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
The verb tense that you would use prior to that, if you look at that and shift that to one that's not locking you into a cycle of the past and saying, oh, how can I shift that to something the future will be more powerful for? But for things like that, when I'm in conversation with people that are open for that, those things pop up for me like really, really quickly. Right. And then the metaphors they utilize, I start to see, okay, well, that's, that's what created that belief system. It's by observing that and being aware of language that allows that to happen. Right. So,
but you've also come into growth and experiences for you to be at this level of experience.
Yeah. And I mean, I've done thousands and thousands of sessions. I've trained, hundreds and hundreds of people. So yeah, for sure. There's those elements that have developed over the years where I start to make those distinctions, right? I think it was in either a second or third live stream, we talked about patterns and detecting patterns. And I've, at a very early stage of my personal development and my coaching and consulting and therapy, I really got that I needed to master the art of finding out what patterns are, and that would give me a lot of cues. And so I've become really good at that over the years. So
yeah, I think in that same one we talked about, again, the terminology. When someone says everything's messed up or nothing is working, and where you're just putting this definitive limitation. It's like everything. Oh my God, nothing works. Nothing. What and Gary kind of touched on this earlier. When we talk about illness, my diabetes, my allergies, my cancer, this is my phone. Okay, I own
Ownership.
I own this. Yeah, I have ownership. Now, if I have ownership, it means that I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to cherish it. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't leave until I choose to make it leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, from me, or I sell it. And then I guess you could sell your cancer or something. But but when we say this, and I hear it all the time, and I'm just like,
it's
no.
beginning with my life. Sorry.
That's fine. Go ahead. This is your call. So what'd you say, Maria?
It's beginning with it's my life too. My life.
Yeah.
But I am the life.
Yeah. So you're separate from what you own. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's it exactly. It's just like, I will own, my reputation. I will own, my life. I will own my health and such. And but at the same time, if something that I'm not really fond of, I'm not going to take ownership of it. It's like, I'm not going to set it aside from me, but I'm gonna look at it differently. I did a lot of coaching with people with diabetes, and they would own this. I mean, people would have it tattooed on them. I'm like, oh my God, come on. And so it's like, no, you don't want to hang on to it, to where it's yours. Now, in some cases, people do, because they have a secondary with this, where they want the attention of owning my diabetes, or owning my cancer, or my something, because that brings sympathy to them.
Yes.
And such. And sometimes, in many cases, a lot of people don't realize is that ownership becomes more important than anything else.
Keeps you stuck.
Yep.
It keeps you stuck, but it brings the attention.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been talking with somebody who you really don't know, and all of a sudden they just start telling you about their illness?
Strangers, all the time.
Well, okay. Okay.
So Ross, I was at the park with Skylar the other day, my daughter, and we're at the park, and she's playing in the park, and I'm sitting off to the side and watching her. And then there's an open bench right in front of me, just a little off in the distance. And this one lady sits down. There was a guy that sat down first, and he was kind of there and just kind of watching his grandkid, I think. And then this other lady comes over. She sits down, and she goes, "Is it okay if I sit here? I've had COVID, so you're okay." I'm like, "Why would you say something like that?" Like, why would you, she was saying it's where he didn't have to worry because she already had it and he couldn't get it from her, whatever. But I'm like, claiming something like that, and you could see that her rest of her health wasn't good either. So it was very clear.
That's another rabbit hole. But even after this call, a lot of you are going to, this stuff is just going to start really popping for you. You're just going to start hearing it, in others and in yourself. And if you find your own terminology has changed, but it really hasn't changed, you've just become aware of it, that's good. That's a good thing. So don't beat yourself up on it. Well, that one too. Beat yourself up. But just like, oh, that's very interesting. Okay. Is this a habit, or is this just something that kind of popped out? And take a little bit of time and do some investigations on your own. Is it empowering? If it's empowering, I want more of this. But if you feel your energy level just kind of drops a little bit, that, Josephine, that's where I'm going with that, is that if you feel that it's disempowering, then it's something that you need to take attention to. And so it's because if it's disempowering in that moment there, then you take that moment and you times it by 10,000, because that's how many times you're going to do it. And then it's like, oh, well, this is not working for me. Okay. And you don't have to stop right, you're driving, like, oh my gosh. And so, but you want to make a mental note.
I want to say something.
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
I want to say something. For me, it is easier to think that that the life is not my life, that I am the life, because if I am live, I know what is good for me. I'm live.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I need for life, that's very easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I think that's my life, I'm so that's so
limited.
for that.
Exactly.
I am not united with all.
Yeah.
Separate.
Right.
Yes, thank you. I'm separate from all the stuff outside.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jean. And so it is easier for me, yes.
Yeah, which
I'm the life.
The singularity thing you were talking about, Ross, is that she's touching with she is all, right? So
Right.
yeah, which is awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, Gary and I were talking about that very subject yesterday, and hopefully we are going to step into it either on a rabbit hole or on a live stream. But it's definitely going into our book, because that's so important. We have
So I have a,
deep need to be part of all, because we probably came from all. We are all. We all came from one speck.
We're just learning how to be connected to the all again. We've always been connected. We're just learning. It's like riding the bike, right?
Yep.
So it's just learning those things again.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a
To a
question.
certain degree, wondering why that knowledge was taken away from us.
So we can learn.
So
keep us busy.
Keep us busy. Keep us weak.
I have a question. And the question is, Ross, you had said in the language that we use with ourselves, if it makes you feel disempowered.
Correct.
So, and Gary, appreciate the pointing out of the language. I really do, because one of my metaphors that I like to use on a fairly regular basis is things live in darkness until the light shines on them.
Nice.
Okay, so they come into light, then you can deal with them because there's an awareness. And once the light shines on them, you see them again and again and again and again. And your awareness is just sort of basically triggered by that. But Gary, your comment about when you're I'd like to think that I'm a fairly introspective individual, having I always want to be better than I am, than I was yesterday. The best version of myself for this moment, right?
Exactly.
So when I use the words that, and I have suspicions in my head which words they were that I used that Gary pointed out. It didn't in that moment feel disempowering. I didn't even notice it because it was such an incredible habit. So the question is then, when your awareness isn't really tuned into it just yet, how do you catch that stuff? How do you find it and dig it out and get rid of it? Because you're not really tuned into it. You're it's sort of skipping by, and it's what you've always done for 50 plus years in my case. So
well, the first thing is to notice if you're still ending up in the reality that you don't prefer. It means that something's still there. You got to tweak in, right? So you got to look in deeper. It just, as you as you expand your bandwidth of what those things are, like what we're doing today, then they become more apparent. You know, and you know, I didn't come out of the womb this way. This is something I developed over the years.
I thought
However,
he did.
however,
I'm sure he told me the other day he did.
however, some people think that I might have. So I have been told. Um, so, but you know, it was an evolution over the years where I became a little bit more, and then I looked at, okay, well, if we can start to, and again, start small, and or start where you're at, not necessarily start small, because I think that's also a presupposition that has to be small. Start where you're at, and wherever you're at, you know, become aware of those things until you find that they're not giving you the result you want. Then when that happens, then you explore and step out of that. When, you know, Ross talks about the elastic band, right? What you do is you're stretching your elastic band to accept this new set of information until that becomes comfortable. When that becomes reality, but then you still feel like you're not where you want to be, or not the self you see yourself as in the future yet, that's okay. Don't be rough on yourself. That future self that's calling you, right? If you get there, it no longer calls you, then there's no more growth, right? So don't feel that there's a place to get to. Use it as the thing that pulls you. Use that metaphor as that of that future self as that thing that pulls you to be a more a complete self of who you truly are at the core. That and know that and trust, this is the key, trust that self will pull you in the direction that you need. It'll shine the light on the things you need shined at the time that you're ready for it. Exactly. Otherwise it won't shine it, because it knows you're not ready for it. If you trust it. If you don't trust it, then it won't shine. But if you trust it, then it will, the right information, and that's where things will say, oh, how synchronous, oh my gosh, that's so synchronous. Well, that's because you're trusting in that higher self to guide you in the direction that's in the best for your soul and your spirit.
And once you start shining that light, and then that your awareness broadens, then you come to the choice convergence point, because now you have a choice. It's like, do I accept this, or do I make a decision that I want to let this go? And that's kind of where you're at. Is you have things that you've had for, as you said, so many years. Okay, well, some of those you're comfortable with, but you have the awareness, and now you're going to go, does this serve me any longer? You don't knock yourself up or kick yourself or anything like that. As, oh, I can't believe I've been dealing with this for so many years. You're just like, this no longer serves me, and I'm going to let it go. That's your choice. Or this does serve me, and I'm going to keep it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to intensify it because it is serving me so well. Okay, there was an analogy that I use is years ago. I was sick, okay, and really just was really struggling. And when I finally found the doctor that would treat me the way I wanted to be treated, he looked at me, and I'll never forget when he said this, because it just stuck with me. He goes, "You're not going to know how good you feel until you start feeling good." No, you're not going to know how bad you feel until you start feeling good. And I use that for everything now. You're not going to realize, where you were until you're here. And like what you said, Mary, is that, I want to be better than I was yesterday. So that's little tiny steps. But then 10 years from now, you're going to look back to today and go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, where I was at.
Because you change your barometer, right? You change your barometer, right?
Exactly.
It's a whole new level of measurement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. That's what we're trying to do for everybody. Is just like, we just want to just, expand that your thinking, and give you more awareness so that you can make better choices.
Yes.
So that's a perfect segue into how I want to wrap up today, because I do have to get going. I think Ross does too, but I want to end it with a metaphor that I used to share with my students when I taught hypnotherapy. It was called to grab or not to grab. Have you ever asked yourself, how does the way you think about yourself become the reality of the self? How do things you say to yourself about yourself function as truth? Or even, do self statements become life commandments, whether or not they are related to the facts? Well, these are all questions I ponder from time to time. I'm reminded of a story I once heard. It's a story about a crabs. Yes, crabs. You see, marine biologists have agreed that crabs are generally no more voracious or greedy than any other creature on the planet. They have a simple existence. They need food, of course, right? But they are not overly aggressive or malicious about getting it. They did, however, find that there are some similarities to people. And once upon a long time ago, there lived a crab. I mean, a mean old crab who seemed to be the exception who proved the rule. He was equipped with big, sharp pincers, and anything that moved was in danger of being grabbed. It seemed like there was never a time when he wasn't in attack mode. And in the grand ocean in which he lived, with all the other sea animals, he was eager to prey on even the poor, unsuspecting animals who swam by. And it didn't even matter if he was hungry or not. At an early age, he had developed his large pincers and decided that he was an attack crab. And from that day forward, that was the way he thought about himself, an attack crab. And this justified his actions of grabbing anything and everything. There was always word spreading about the sea animals that he often bragged about his deadly characteristics. He was proud of this quality and interpreted it as a very valuable asset. In fact, it was rumored that rumor had it that he had a very firmly embedded belief about himself that went something like this: nothing gets by me. And once I get a hold of something, well, I never, and I mean never, let it go. One day, the sun was doing what it always does when the sky was clear. Except today, it was playing on the waters in a very unusual and uncharacteristic way. And this resulted in shadows on the bottom of the shallow waters to dart across the bottom. And there was the crab, waiting for his next victim. When all of a sudden, something went by. And as if to fulfill his mission, he grabbed and clamped down hard, not realizing that it was the shadows created by the sun, the playful sun above. He got hold of something. He locked it and gripped it and brought it in closer to celebrate his victory by dining on his captive. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but crabs, they are notoriously nearsighted. So he brought the prize closer. He was embarrassed and astonished that he had clamped down on his right claw with his left claw, and vice versa. So they were clamped, right? He had clamped so tight that he was unable to release his pincers from his grip. At this point, I'll let you in on a little secret. He could easily just release the grip, but it was his mind that prevented him. You see, he had only learned to grasp, to grab, to clamp down. There was never a lesson, self-taught or otherwise, to let go and release. His lack of lesson caused his thoughts to get stuck in the pattern of being stubborn and affirming his self-belief. I'm a grabber. I never let go. Never even considering the option of opening his claws. Like many humans, this crab was trapped in his own limiting belief systems. And unwilling to change, he slowly starved, unwilling to realize and too stubborn to admit that this was one scenario where his perceived assets were his greatest liabilities. Just too thick-skulled to acknowledge that his limited perspective would be the end of him. And even in his dying moments, he continued to curse his cruel and unfair fate. Life just isn't fair. What bad luck? Why me? And he went on until he could no more. Isn't it interesting how humans can use poor fate, bad luck, and unfair fortune to blame almost anything that doesn't go our way? It's a handy scapegoat, alleviating your own responsibility for the outcome of the events. I mean, how could this stubborn shellfish not realize his strengths were being used by himself to bring about his own destruction? What could have blinded even a nearsighted crab so much that he could not see beyond his past habits and his hardened beliefs? To grab or not to grab? That is the question. And there you have it for today. So metaphors can be used for good and they can be used for bad. That's the point, right? They can be used to facilitate transformation, and they can be used to lock people in and guide them into something that may be disempowering. Choose and understand and become more aware of the metaphors that are in your world and in your life. And I would challenge you with those that you are comfortable with, definitely amongst this group here that's on the call, to start to shift your languaging, to start to call them on it, because they're open for it. Mary, I wouldn't have said anything if I didn't feel that you would be ready and receptive for it. So the being in this type of community allows us all to be open for knowing when to release, when to let go from those things that are not supporting us. All right, so I'm off. Be well, everyone. And we will see you on either Thursday for the call, for this live stream, or next Saturday for another Down the Rabbit Hole.
Everybody have a great one.
Be well, everyone.
Have a great week
Bye.
long.
I will see you later.
All right,
We
say it
will
again.
be
so I
here.
didn't hear that.
Bye.
Be
Enjoy
well.
Oh,
Everyone.
great. Thank you.
Bye.
the illustrate. Yeah.
Great,
Thank you.
thank
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining
Be well.
Thank
well.
you.
in.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.